The morning sun cast long shadows across the naval base in California as Commander Sarah Mitchell walked toward the briefing room. Her boots clicked against the polished concrete floor with the same steady rhythm that had carried her through 12 years of military service. At 34, she had earned her place as one of the Navy's most respected intelligence officers, but today would test everything she had learned about leadership, respect, and the power of words. The briefing room buzzed with the low murmur of conversation as 24 elite Navy SEALs filled the metal chairs. These weren't ordinary sailors. Each man in the room had survived the grueling selection process that weeded out 90% of candidates. They had endured Hell Week, mastered underwater demolition, and proven themselves in combat zones around the world. Their faces bore the quiet confidence of warriors who had stared death in the eye and lived to tell about it. Lieutenant Commander, the team leader, glanced at his watch and frowned. He was expecting Admiral to deliver today's mission briefing, not some intelligence officer he'd never met. His team had just returned from a successful operation in Afghanistan 3 weeks ago, and they were eager to get back into action. The last thing they needed was another desk jockey telling them how to do their job. "Who's the new face?" whispered Petty Officer Jake to his teammate sitting beside him. Had been with the SEALs for 8 years and had developed a healthy skepticism of anyone who hadn't earned their Trident badge in combat. "Some intel officer," replied Chief Petty Officer David, his voice carrying a note of dismissal. "Probably here to tell us about targets we already know better than she does." The conversation died as Sarah entered the room. She moved with purpose, her navy blue uniform crisp and professional. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her green eyes swept across the room, taking in each face with the analytical precision that had made her invaluable in intelligence work. She had studied these men's files extensively. She knew their combat records, their specialties, their strengths and weaknesses better than some of them knew themselves. "Good morning," Sarah said, her voice clear and steady as she approached the podium. "I'm Commander Mitchell from Naval Intelligence. I'll be briefing you on Operation Nightfall." A collective shift rippled through the room. Several SEALs exchanged glances, their expressions ranging from skeptical to mildly annoyed. They were used to being briefed by their own commanders, men who understood the realities of special operations because they had lived them. Lieutenant Commander stood up, his 6-foot frame imposing even in the seated room. "Ma'am, with all due respect, shouldn't Admiral be handling this briefing? This is a SEAL operation, and we prefer to get our intel from someone who understands our capabilities firsthand." His words were polite but carried an unmistakable challenge. The message was clear: you don't belong here. Sarah paused, her hand resting on the classified folder containing the mission details. She had faced skepticism before, but never quite so openly from an entire team of elite operators. She could feel the weight of their judgment, the unspoken assumption that her presence was a formality to be endured rather than expertise to be valued. "I understand your preference, Lieutenant Commander," she replied evenly. "Admiral was called away on urgent business. However, I've spent the last 6 months developing the intelligence package for this operation. I know every detail of the target area, the enemy positions, and the strategic objectives." Petty Officer leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed. "Knowing something from a satellite photo and knowing it from boots on the ground are two different things, ma'am." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Sarah felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came with being underestimated, but she had learned long ago not to let emotion show on her face. Instead, she opened the folder and activated the large screen behind her. "The target is a compound in the province," she began, displaying a detailed satellite image. "Intelligence indicates that high-value target is using this location as a safe house. He's responsible for coordinating attacks against coalition forces and has been linked to at least 14 IED incidents in the past 3 months. Chief Petty Officer raised his hand. "Ma'am, we've been operating in that region for 2 years. We know his patterns, his associates, his habits. What makes this intel different from what we already have?" Sarah clicked to the next slide, revealing intercepted communications transcripts. 3 days ago, we intercepted communications indicating that is planning a major operation against Forward Operating Base Chapman. The attack is scheduled for next week during a supply convoy arrival. The room fell silent for a moment as the SEALs processed this information. Leaned forward, his interest piqued despite his initial skepticism. "What's the source of these intercepts?" A combination of signals intelligence and human intelligence from an asset we've been developing for 8 months, Sarah replied. The asset has proven reliable on 7 previous occasions, including the intelligence that led to the capture of Lieutenant last month. Petty officer shifted in his seat. That was our operation. We never heard about any intel asset. Because operational security required compartmentalization, Sarah explained patiently. The asset's identity and methods are known only to a select few in intelligence. What matters is that the information has been through multiple channels. Stood again, his frustration becoming more apparent. Commander, no disrespect intended, but we've been hunting for 6 months. We know his habits, his security measures, his escape routes. We don't need someone from intelligence telling us how to plan an assault. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Sarah could feel the collective will of the team aligning against her, their unity forged through shared experiences she could never claim. They saw her as an outsider, a bureaucrat trying to direct warriors. I'm not telling you how to plan an assault, Lieutenant Commander, Sarah said, her voice remaining steady despite the growing tension. I'm providing you with intelligence that could save lives and ensure mission success. There are aspects of this operation that require careful coordination with other assets in the field. What other assets? Asked Chief, his tone sharp. Sarah hesitated for a fraction of a second. The truth was that there were CIA operatives and drone assets positioned to support the operation, but that information was classified at a level that required special authorization to share. She had been hoping to build rapport with the team before revealing the full scope of the mission. That information is compartmentalized pending final mission approval, she said finally. The admission triggered an immediate reaction. Several SEALs began speaking at once, their voices rising with frustration and suspicion. She doesn't trust us with the full picture, someone muttered. Typical intel games, another voice added. Held up his hand for silence, but his expression had hardened. Commander Mitchell, my team has operated successfully on incomplete intelligence before, but never when someone with the complete picture was sitting right in front of us. Either you trust us with the mission details or you don't. Which is it? Sarah felt the moment slipping away from her. Everything she had learned in leadership training told her to maintain control, to assert her authority, to remind these men that she outranked most of them. But something deeper, an instinct honed through years of reading people and situations, warned her that authority alone would not win this room. She began but cut her off. Ma'am, with respect, I think we need to contact Admiral directly and get clarification on the command structure for this operation. My team doesn't operate effectively when we're getting partial information from someone who hasn't been in the field. The challenge was now explicit, was questioning not just her intelligence but her right to brief them at all. The room fell silent, waiting to see how she would respond. Sarah could feel 24 pairs of eyes studying her, measuring her reaction, waiting for her to either establish her authority or retreat. This was the moment she had been preparing for without knowing it, the test that would define not just this mission but her future relationships with special operations teams. She had 2 choices. She could pull rank and demand their attention, or she could find another way to earn their respect. Sarah closed the folder and stepped out from behind the podium. You're right, Lieutenant Commander, she said quietly. You don't know me, and I haven't earned the right to your trust. But I'm going to ask you to give me 5 more minutes to explain why this mission is different, and why the intelligence I'm carrying could mean the difference between bringing all your men home or losing someone in an avoidable firefight. The room remained silent, but she sensed a slight shift in their attention. It wasn't acceptance, but it was willingness to listen. Glanced at his watch, then at his team. 5 minutes, Commander. Sarah nodded and walked closer to the seated SEALs, abandoning the formal distance of the podium. When she spoke again, her voice carried a different quality, more personal and direct. 2 months ago, a British SAS team attempted to capture using intelligence similar to what you've been working with. They knew his location, his security routine, and his escape routes. What they didn't know was that he had been tipped off 12 hours earlier by a source inside the Afghan National Police. 3 SAS operators walked into an ambush. 2 of them didn't come home. She paused, letting the weight of those words settle in the room. Every SEAL understood the bond between teammates, the sacred responsibility to bring everyone home. The intelligence I'm carrying isn't just about its location, she continued. It's about the corruption network that's been feeding him information, the timing of police patrols that could compromise your insertion, and the civilian presence in the area that could complicate your extraction. This isn't a simple snatch and grab operation. It's a carefully orchestrated effort to eliminate not just, but the entire support network that's been keeping him one step ahead of coalition forces. Chief leaned forward, his skepticism beginning to crack. What kind of support network? Sarah returned to the screen and displayed a complex organizational chart. Has been receiving intelligence from at least 3 sources within the provincial government. Our asset has identified 2 police commanders and a district administrator who have been passing information about coalition movements. The operation window we've identified isn't just when we'll be at the compound. It's when all 3 of his sources will be occupied with other duties, giving us the best chance of a clean capture without tipping off his network. The room buzzed with quiet conversation as the SEALs absorbed this new information. Sarah could see the shift in their body language, the way they leaned forward with interest instead of back with skepticism. Petty officer raised his hand. Ma'am, how reliable is this network intelligence? The asset has provided actionable intelligence that led to the disruption of 4 separate attack plans over the past 6 months, Sarah replied. Each time the information was through independent channels before action was taken. The success rate has been 100%. Remained standing, but his posture had relaxed slightly. What aren't you telling us about this asset? Sarah met his gaze directly. The asset is in a position of significant personal risk. Revealing more details about their identity or methods could compromise not only this operation but future intelligence gathering that could save American lives. What I can tell you is that the asset has requested specific timing for this operation to coincide with a window of opportunity that may not come again. The lieutenant commander studied her for a long moment, weighing her words against his instincts. Commander, my team has operated on trust and complete information sharing. If we're going to put our lives on the line based on your intelligence, we need to know that you have complete confidence in your source. I stake my career on the reliability of this intelligence, Sarah replied without hesitation. If I'm wrong, I'll face the consequences. But if we miss this opportunity because we're debating the source instead of planning the operation, we'll disappear again, and the next convoy hit might include people you've served with. The room fell silent again, but the quality of the silence had changed. It was no longer hostile skepticism, but thoughtful consideration. Sarah could sense the team's internal debate, their professional instincts weighing her words against their reservations about working with an intelligence officer they didn't know. Chief broke the silence. What's the proposed timeline for the operation? Sarah felt a small surge of hope. The question indicated engagement rather than resistance. The window opens in 72 hours and remains viable for 6 hours. The asset will be in position to provide real-time updates on its location and security posture, but only during that specific. And if we miss the window, asked, has been planning to relocate for weeks. Our intelligence suggests he's nervous about increased coalition activity in the area. If he moves, it could be months before we have another opportunity like this. Petty officer stood up, his expression serious. Commander, I've got one question that matters more than all the intelligence in the world. Do you believe this operation will bring all my teammates home safely? It was the question Sarah had been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. It cut to the heart of everything that mattered in special operations, the sacred trust between those who plan missions and those who execute them. She could give him statistics about success rates and risk assessments, but what he was really asking was whether she understood the weight of sending men into harm's way. Sarah looked around the room, meeting each man's eyes before returning her attention to, Petty officer, I can't guarantee that any military operation will be without risk. What I can guarantee is that the intelligence package I'm providing gives you every advantage we can offer. I've spent 6 months studying this target, this area, and this enemy network. I've cross-referenced every piece of information with multiple sources. I believe this operation has the best chance of success, with the lowest risk to your team that we're likely to see. She paused, then added quietly, and yes, I believe following this intelligence will bring you all home. Exchanged glances with his senior enlisted men, engaging in the silent communication that comes from years of working together under pressure. Sarah watched the interplay, understanding that her fate in this room rested not just on her words, but on the collective judgment of men who had survived by trusting their instincts about people and situations. Finally nodded slowly. "All right, Commander Mitchell, you've got our attention. Let's see the full briefing." Sarah felt tension she hadn't realized she was carrying begin to ease from her shoulders. It wasn't complete acceptance yet, but it was a beginning. She returned to the podium and opened the classified folder fully for the first time. "Thank you. Let's start with the target analysis and work through the operational timeline." For the next hour, Sarah walked the SEALs through every aspect of the intelligence package. She detailed daily routine, the layout of the compound, the positioning of guards, and the civilian presence in the surrounding area. She explained the communication intercepts that had revealed the planned attack on Fob Chapman and the narrow window during which would be vulnerable. The SEALs asked pointed questions about insertion and extraction routes, backup plans, and contingencies for various scenarios. Sarah answered each question with specific details, drawing on months of analysis and preparation. Gradually, she could see their professional respect beginning to override their initial skepticism. Chief raised his hand during a discussion of the compound's security measures. "Commander, this guard rotation pattern you've identified, how recent is this intelligence?" "The pattern was observed and as recently as yesterday," Sarah replied. "Our asset has been monitoring the location for 3 weeks, documenting any changes in security procedures. The pattern has remained consistent for the past 10 days. Petty officer leaned forward. "What about escape routes? It's not going to just sit there if he realizes we're coming." Sarah displayed a detailed map of the surrounding area. "There are 3 primary escape routes from the compound. Route Alpha leads northeast through a series of caves toward the Pakistani border. Route Bravo heads west through the village toward a known Taliban safe house. Route Charlie goes south through open terrain toward a river crossing." She highlighted each route with a laser pointer. "Our analysis suggests we'll most likely attempt Route Alpha if he has advance warning, Route Bravo if he's surprised but has time to think, and Route Charlie only if the other routes are blocked." Studied the map carefully. "What's your recommendation for blocking these routes?" "That's outside my area of expertise," Sarah admitted. "I can provide intelligence on the routes themselves, but tactical decisions about how to control them should come from your team's operational planning." It was exactly the right answer. Sarah could see several SEALs nod approvingly at her recognition of the boundaries between intelligence and operations. She was providing information, not trying to run their mission. The briefing continued for another 30 minutes, covering weather conditions, local civilian patterns, friendly force positions, and communication protocols. With each question answered and each detail provided, Sarah could feel the room's energy shifting from skepticism to professional engagement. Finally stood and addressed his team. "Questions, concerns?" Chief raised his hand. "Timeline's tight but manageable. The intelligence package is more comprehensive than anything we've had for previous operations." Nodded his agreement. "The asset intelligence fills in gaps we've had for months. If it's accurate, this could be the break we've been waiting for." Other team members murmured their agreement. Sarah watched as the SEALs shifted from evaluating her to evaluating the mission itself, a transition that marked her acceptance as a credible source of intelligence. Turned back to Sarah. "Commander, on behalf of my team, I apologize for the rough start. We've had some bad experiences with intelligence officers who didn't understand the realities of special operations. Your briefing has been thorough and professional." Sarah felt a warmth of vindication, but she also understood that this was just the beginning. Earning their respect for a briefing was one thing. Proving herself in the crucible of actual operations was another matter entirely. "Thank you, Lieutenant Commander," she replied. "I understand your initial skepticism. Trust has to be earned, and I hope I've taken the first step in that process." The meeting was winding down when asked the question that would change everything. "Commander, will you be available for real-time intelligence support during the operation?" Sarah had been hoping he would ask. "Yes, I'll be in the Tactical Operations Center with direct communication to our asset. I can provide updates on target movement, security changes, and any new intelligence that develops during the operation." "Outstanding," said. "Having you available for real-time support could make the difference between success and failure." As the SEALs filed out of the briefing room, Several stopped to ask follow-up questions about specific details. Sarah answered each query with patience and precision, understanding that every interaction was building the foundation of trust that would be crucial during the actual operation. Chief was the last to leave. He approached Sarah's position at the podium, his expression thoughtful. "Commander," he said quietly, "I want you to know that my initial reaction wasn't personal. We've just learned to be careful about intelligence that looks too good to be true." Sarah nodded. "I understand completely, Chief. In your position, I'd feel the same way." "The thing is," continued, "this intelligence really is comprehensive. If it's accurate, this operation could be exactly what we need to take off the board permanently." "It is accurate," Sarah said with quiet confidence. "I've staked my reputation on it." Studied her for a moment longer, then extended his hand. "Then let's go catch this bastard." As Sarah shook his hand, she felt the satisfaction of a barrier overcome and a relationship begun. But she also felt the weight of responsibility settling more heavily on her shoulders. These men were going to risk their lives based on her intelligence. The brief feeling of triumph was tempered by the sobering reality of what lay ahead. The next 72 hours would test everything she had learned about intelligence analysis, everything she believed about her assets' reliability, and everything she hoped about her own judgment. The SEALs had accepted her intelligence and her presence in the operation, but the real test was yet to come. Sarah gathered her materials and headed back to the Intelligence Center, where she would spend the next 3 days monitoring every piece of information coming from the target area, refining her analysis, and preparing for the moment when 24 elite warriors would put their lives on the line based on her work. The first phase of earning their respect was complete. Now came the harder part, proving that she deserved it. The Tactical Operations Center hummed with quiet intensity as Sarah Mitchell settled into her position at the intelligence console. Banks of monitors displayed real-time feeds from satellites, drones, and ground-based sensors covering the target area in province. The room buzzed with controlled activity as communications specialists, analysts, and operations officers prepared for what could be the most significant counterterrorism operation in the region this year. 48 hours had passed since the initial briefing, and every piece of intelligence had been en route. Sarah had barely slept, spending her time coordinating with the asset in Afghanistan, analyzing fresh satellite imagery, and monitoring communications intercepts. The operation window was now just 6 hours away, and everything indicated that would be at the target compound exactly when their intelligence predicted. "Commander Mitchell," called Major Hayes, the Operations Center Director. "We've got the SEAL team's final communications check in 15 minutes. Are you ready to provide the final intelligence update?" Sarah nodded, her fingers dancing across the keyboard as she pulled up the latest reports. "Asset confirmed arrival at the compound 30 minutes ago. Security rotation is proceeding according to established patterns. Weather conditions are optimal, and civilian presence in the area is minimal." The confidence in her voice masked the knot of tension in her stomach. She had built her career on careful analysis and measured assessments, but tonight felt different. The stakes were higher, the variables more complex, and the consequences of error more severe than anything she had previously handled. Lieutenant Commander's voice crackled through the communication system from the forward staging area. "TOC, this is Neptune 6. Request final intelligence update." Sarah leaned toward her microphone. "Neptune 6, this is Overwatch. Target confirmed at primary location as of 30 minutes ago. Security posture unchanged from previous assessments. Asset reports normal activity levels with no indicators of compromise. Weather window remains optimal for insertion." "Copy Overwatch. Any changes to civilian presence estimates?" Sarah consulted her latest reports. "Negative, Neptune 6. Civilian population in immediate target area remains minimal. Closest non-combatant activity is approximately 400 meters south of the compound, consistent with normal evening patterns." "Outstanding, Overwatch. Neptune 6 out." Major Hayes approached Sarah's station, carrying a steaming cup of coffee. "How are you holding up, Commander?" "I'm good, ma'am," Sarah replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "All indicators continue to support our operational timeline. The asset has maintained consistent reporting, and I'm confident in the intelligence picture." Hayes studied the displays showing the various intelligence feeds. This is comprehensive work, Sarah. I've been running this TOC for 3 years, and this is one of the most complete intelligence packages I've seen for a direct action mission. The praise felt good, but Sarah remained focused on the streams of data flowing across her screens. Thank you, ma'am, but the real test comes when the team is on the ground. At the forward staging area, gathered his team for the final briefing. 24 SEALs sat in a semicircle around a scale model of the target compound, their faces painted with camouflage and their gear checked and rechecked. These men had been preparing for this mission for 36 hours, memorizing every detail of the compound layout, rehearsing their assault plan, and coordinating their roles down to the second. "All right," began, his voice carrying the calm authority that came from leading men in combat for over a decade. "This is what we've been working toward, has been a high-value target for 6 months, and tonight we have the best intelligence we've ever had on his location and security posture." Chief pointed to the model compound. "Insertion via fast rope from 2 helicopters at Landing Zone Alpha. Team 1 takes the main building where is believed to be located. Team 2 secures the compound perimeter and blocks escape routes. Team 3 provides overwatch and backup." Petty officer raised his hand. "Chief, what's our confidence level on the intelligence about guard positions?" "Commander Mitchell's asset has been observing the compound for 3 weeks," replied. "Guard rotation patterns have been consistent, and the most recent update was 30 minutes ago. I'm comfortable with the intelligence picture." The admission represented a significant shift from initial skepticism about Sarah's briefing. Over the past 48 hours, every piece of intelligence she had provided had proven accurate. Satellite imagery had confirmed the compound layout she described. Communications intercepts had the guard rotation schedule. Even small details about local civilian patterns had checked out exactly as her analysis predicted. Petty Officer First Class Michael Torres, the team's explosives specialist, studied the model carefully. "What about the backup escape route through the caves? If gets out of the main building, those caves could hide him for hours." "Team 4 will be positioned to monitor and block the cave entrance," explained. "Commander Mitchell's intelligence indicates that route is most likely escape option if he has advance warning of our approach." The SEALs continued their final preparations with the methodical precision of elite warriors. Equipment was inspected one last time, communications protocols were reviewed, and contingency plans were discussed. Throughout the process, Sarah's intelligence package served as the foundation for every tactical decision. Back in the TOC, Sarah monitored the team's preparations while maintaining contact with her asset in Afghanistan. The asset, operating under the code name Falcon, had been providing updates every 30 minutes since arrival at the compound. Her secure communication device buzzed with an incoming message from Falcon. "Target remains in main building. 2 guards at front entrance, 1 at rear. Perimeter patrol continuing normal pattern. No indicators of unusual activity." Sarah quickly relayed this information to the SEAL team. "Neptune 6, this is Overwatch. Asset reports target still in primary location. Guard positions unchanged. No indicators of compromise." "Copy, Overwatch. Neptune is moving to final staging position." The next 2 hours passed with agonizing slowness as the SEAL team moved into position for the assault. Sarah tracked their progress through GPS beacons and communication updates, while simultaneously monitoring every available intelligence source for any indication that the operation might be compromised. At 2200 hours, reported from the final staging position. "Overwatch, Neptune 6 is in position approximately 2 kilometers from target. Request final intelligence update before commencing approach." Sarah consulted her latest reports from Falcon and cross-referenced them with satellite imagery and communications intercepts. "Neptune 6, target confirmed in primary location as of 15 minutes ago. Guard rotation proceeding on schedule. No change in security posture. You are cleared to commence approach." "Copy, Overwatch. Neptune 6 moving to target." The assault began exactly as planned. 2 MH-60 Black Hawk helicopters approached the compound from different directions, flying low and fast to minimize detection time. The lead helicopter carried, and 12 SEALs who would conduct the primary assault. The second helicopter carried the remaining team members who would secure the perimeter and provide backup. Sarah watched the operation unfold through multiple camera feeds from the helicopters and a high-altitude surveillance drone. The infrared imaging showed the SEAL teams fast-roping into the compound exactly on schedule, their movements precise and coordinated despite the darkness and difficult terrain. Overwatch Neptune 6, we're on target, beginning building assault. Sarah's pulse quickened as she watched the thermal images of the SEALs moving through the compound. Everything was proceeding according to plan, but she knew that the most critical moments were still ahead. Finding and capturing alive would require split-second timing and flawless execution. Neptune 6, this is Neptune 4. Perimeter secured. No movement on escape routes. Neptune 6, this is Neptune 2. Overwatch positions established. We have eyes on all approaches. His voice came through clearly despite the stress of combat. Neptune elements, this is Neptune 6. Commencing building clearance. Sarah leaned forward, her eyes fixed on the thermal displays showing the SEALs moving through the main building. Room by room, they advanced with the methodical precision that came from hundreds of hours of training and years of combat experience. Overwatch Neptune 6, first floor clear, moving to second floor. Sarah's asset had reported that was most likely in a second-floor room that served as his temporary command center. The intelligence suggested he preferred this location because it offered multiple escape routes and good visibility of approaching threats. Neptune 6, this is Neptune 3. Movement detected in target room. Single individual appears to match target profile. Sarah felt her heart rate spike. This was the moment everything had been building toward. 6 months of intelligence gathering, 3 weeks of planning, and 48 hours of preparation were about to be tested in the space of a few seconds. Neptune 6 copies, moving to target room. The next 30 seconds felt like an eternity. Sarah watched the thermal images as the SEALs positioned themselves outside the target room, preparing for the final assault that would either capture one of Afghanistan's most wanted terrorists or result in another missed opportunity. Overwatch Neptune 6, breaching target room now. The thermal display flared white as the SEALs deployed flashbang grenades and burst through the door. Shouts and movement filled the communication channel, but the specific details were lost in the chaos of close-quarters combat. Then's voice cut through the noise, clear and controlled. Overwatch Neptune 6, target secured, say again target secured, is in custody. A cheer erupted in the TOC as the news spread through the operations center. Sarah felt a surge of relief and vindication so powerful it nearly brought tears to her eyes. The intelligence had been correct, the operation had succeeded, and most importantly, all the SEALs were safe. Outstanding work, Neptune 6, Major Hayes responded over the communication system. What's your status for extraction? All Neptune elements are green, target secured and ready for extraction. Estimated time to extraction LZ is 15 minutes. Sarah slumped back in her chair, the tension finally beginning to drain from her body. The operation had succeeded beyond their best hopes, validating months of intelligence work and proving the value of the asset network she had spent so long developing. But her relief was short-lived. As she monitored the SEAL team's movement toward the extraction landing zone, a new message came through from Falcon. Multiple vehicles approaching compound from the east. Estimate 6 to 8 armed personnel. Recommend immediate extraction. Sarah's blood went cold. The approaching vehicles weren't part of the intelligence picture, and their timing suggested they might be reinforcements responding to the assault. She immediately passed the information to Neptune 6, this is Overwatch. Asset reports multiple vehicles approaching from the east. 6 to 8 armed personnel estimated. Recommend expedited extraction. His response was immediate. Copy Overwatch. Neptune elements adjust extraction route to avoid eastern approach. Move with urgency. Sarah watched through the drone feed as the SEAL teams changed their movement pattern, taking a longer but safer route to the extraction point. The approaching vehicles were now visible on thermal imaging, and they were definitely heading toward the compound. Overwatch Neptune 6, can you identify the approaching vehicles? Sarah consulted with the drone operator and enhanced the thermal imaging. Neptune 6, thermal signature suggests civilian vehicles, but armed personnel confirmed. Cannot determine if they're Taliban, local police, or other actors. Copy, continuing to extraction point. The next 10 minutes were tense, as the SEALs moved through unfamiliar terrain while carrying their prisoner and avoiding the approaching reinforcements. Sarah coordinated with the drone operator to provide real-time updates on the locations of both the SEAL teams and the potential threats. Neptune 6, this is Neptune 7. Extraction helicopters inbound, ETA 5 minutes. Copy Neptune 7. All Neptune elements converging on extraction LZ. Sarah monitored the final phase of the operation with growing confidence. The SEALs had successfully captured their target and were moving toward extraction without significant interference from the approaching vehicles. Whatever those vehicles represented, they had arrived too late to affect the mission. Overwatch Neptune 6, all elements at extraction LZ, loading prisoner and equipment now. Copy Neptune 6, outstanding work. As the helicopters lifted off with the SEAL teams and their high-value prisoner, Sarah felt the satisfaction of a mission accomplished. The intelligence had been accurate, the operation had succeeded, and most importantly, every SEAL was returning home safely. Major Hayes approached Sarah's station with a broad smile. "Commander, that was exceptional work. The intelligence package you developed made this operation possible." "Thank you, ma'am," Sarah replied. "But the real credit goes to the SEALs who executed the mission and the asset who provided the actionable intelligence." Over the next hour, Sarah compiled the post-operation intelligence report, documenting lessons learned and updating the intelligence picture based on observations from the mission. The capture of would undoubtedly provide new intelligence about terrorist networks in the region, potentially leading to additional operations against his associates. As she worked, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. 3 days ago, she had walked into a room full of skeptical SEALs who questioned her expertise and her right to brief them. Tonight, those same warriors had trusted her intelligence with their lives and achieved a significant victory against terrorism. The secure phone at her station rang, interrupting her thoughts. "Commander Mitchell, this is Lieutenant Commander calling from the forward base." "Good evening, sir. Congratulations on a successful mission." "Thank you, Commander. I'm calling to personally thank you for the intelligence support. Your briefing was thorough, your real-time updates were invaluable, and most importantly, your intelligence was accurate. My team is alive tonight because of your work." The words meant more to Sarah than any official commendation could. Earning the trust and respect of elite operators like the SEALs represented validation of everything she had worked to achieve in her military career. "I appreciate that, sir. It was an honor to support your team. Commander, I want you to know that my initial skepticism about your briefing wasn't personal. We've had some bad experiences with intelligence that didn't match ground truth. But your work was different. It was comprehensive, accurate, and actionable." "I understand completely, sir. Trust has to be earned, and I'm glad I was able to demonstrate the value of the intelligence." Paused for a moment. "There's something else, Commander. During the mission debrief, my team specifically requested that you be included in any future operations we conduct in this region. They want to work with you again." Sarah felt a surge of professional pride. The respect of elite warriors was not easily earned, and their request to work with her again represented the highest form of endorsement her work could receive. "I would be honored to support future operations, sir." "Outstanding. I suspect we'll be calling on your expertise again soon. The capture of is likely to generate new intelligence leads that will require your analytical skills." As the call ended, Sarah began planning for the intelligence exploitation of capture. Documents and electronic devices recovered from the compound would need to be analyzed, and interrogation would likely reveal information about other high-value targets and planned attacks. The mission was over, but Sarah's work was just beginning. She had proven herself to one of the military's most elite units, but that success brought new responsibilities and higher expectations. The SEALs would be counting on her for future operations, and she was determined not to disappoint them. Major Hayes approached her station one final time before the night shift ended. "Sarah, you should be proud of what you accomplished tonight. That was textbook intelligence support, and the results speak for themselves." "Thank you, ma'am. It feels good to know that the intelligence made a difference." "It made all the difference," Hayes replied. "And I have a feeling this is just the beginning. The Special Operations Command has already been asking about the intelligence officer who provided the briefing. I think you're going to find yourself in high demand. As Sarah gathered her materials and prepared to leave the TOC, she reflected on the events of the past 72 hours. She had started with skeptical SEALs who questioned her credentials and expertise. She was ending with a successful mission, captured terrorist, and the respect of some of the military's most elite warriors. But perhaps most importantly, she had discovered something about herself in the process. When challenged by experts who questioned her knowledge and authority, she had found the confidence to stand her ground while remaining humble enough to recognize the boundaries of her expertise. She had learned to earn respect rather than simply demanding it. The walk back to her quarters was quiet, but Sarah's mind was already turning to the future. The success of tonight's operation would open new opportunities for her in the special operations community. She would have chances to brief other elite units, support additional high-risk missions, and continue developing the asset networks that made operations like tonight possible. As she reached her door, Sarah paused to look back at the TOC where the night shift was continuing to monitor operations around the world. Somewhere in Afghanistan, 24 SEALs were flying home after a successful mission, their trust in her intelligence validated by the results they had achieved. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new missions, and new opportunities to prove herself. But tonight, Sarah Mitchell went to sleep knowing that she had earned her place among the warriors and professionals who fought America's most dangerous enemies. The words that would soon silence an entire SEAL team were yet to be spoken, but the foundation for that moment had been laid in the crucible of combat, and the bonds forged between intelligence professionals and the warriors who depended on their work. The real test was still ahead, but Sarah now knew she had the skills, the knowledge, and the confidence to face whatever challenges awaited her in the shadows, where intelligence officers and special operators worked together to protect their nation's interests around the world. 6 months after the successful capture of Commander Sarah Mitchell found herself in a position she could never have imagined when she first walked into that skeptical briefing room. She had become the go-to intelligence officer for Special Operations Command, briefing elite units across multiple theaters of operation. Her reputation for thorough analysis and actionable intelligence had spread throughout the Special Operations community, earning her respect from Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, and Marine Force reconnaissance units alike. The relationship with Lieutenant Commander's SEAL team had evolved into something special. They had conducted 4 more successful operations based on Sarah's intelligence, each one building greater trust and more effective collaboration. The SEALs had come to see her not just as an intelligence officer, but as an integral part of their team, someone whose expertise made them more effective and safer in the field. Today, however, would test that relationship in ways none of them anticipated. The briefing room at Naval Special Warfare Command was packed with more people than usual. In addition to SEAL team, the room included representatives from Army Special Forces, Marine Raiders, and Air Force Special Operations. The mission they were about to discuss was the largest joint special operations effort of the year, targeting a major terrorist training facility in Syria that intelligence indicated was preparing operatives for attacks on American soil. Sarah stood at the front of the room, her confidence a stark contrast to the nervous intelligence officer who had faced skeptical SEALs 6 months earlier. She had earned her place among these warriors through proven competence and unwavering reliability. But today's briefing would be different from anything she had done before, not because of the complexity of the mission, but because of what she would be forced to reveal about how the intelligence was obtained. "Good morning," Sarah began, her voice clear and authoritative. "I'm here to brief you on Operation Damascus Steel, a joint mission targeting the Al training facility in eastern Syria." The room was immediately attentive. Al had been a priority target for months, but previous intelligence had been insufficient to justify the resources required for a major assault. The fact that Sarah was briefing them suggested that the intelligence picture had changed dramatically. Lieutenant Commander leaned forward in his chair. "Commander Mitchell, what's the source of the new intelligence on Al? We've been trying to get actionable intel on that facility for 8 months." Sarah activated the large screen behind her, displaying satellite imagery of a sprawling compound in the Syrian desert. "The intelligence comes from multiple sources, including signals intercepts, satellite reconnaissance, and human intelligence from an asset who has been inside the facility." A murmur ran through the room. Human intelligence from inside a terrorist training facility was extraordinarily rare and valuable. The risks to any asset operating in such an environment were enormous, and the potential intelligence value was correspondingly high. Master Sergeant James from Army Special Forces raised his hand. "Ma'am, what's the reliability assessment for this human intelligence?" Sarah hesitated for the first time in months of briefings. The question cut to the heart of the moral complexity that had been keeping her awake at night for the past 2 weeks. The asset has provided accurate intelligence for over a year and has been through multiple independent sources. "What kind of access does the asset have?" asked Captain Lisa Torres from Marine Raiders. Again, Sarah paused. "The asset has direct access to training schedules, personnel rosters, and operational planning discussions." Chief Petty Officer, who had become one of Sarah's strongest supporters, sensed something in her tone. "Commander, is there something about this asset that we should know?" Sarah felt the weight of 24 pairs of eyes studying her. These were men and women who had learned to trust her judgment implicitly, who had risked their lives based on her intelligence, and who deserved complete honesty about the sources of information they would use to plan this mission. "The asset is a 15-year-old boy," she said quietly. The room fell dead silent. The implications of that statement hit everyone simultaneously. A 15-year-old providing intelligence from inside a terrorist training facility could only mean one thing: he was being trained as a terrorist himself. Was the first to speak, his voice tight with tension. "Commander, are you telling us that our intelligence source is a child who's being trained to conduct terrorist attacks?" "Yes," Sarah replied, meeting his gaze directly. "The asset was recruited by Al 18 months ago. He was initially selected for training as a suicide bomber for an attack planned against American targets in Europe." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah could see the shock and moral conflict playing out on the faces of every operator in the room. These were warriors who had devoted their lives to protecting innocent people, particularly children, from the very kind of threats this boy was being trained to carry out. Master Sergeant stood up, his face flushed with anger. "Ma'am, with all due respect, how the hell can we use intelligence from a child who's being turned into a human weapon?" Sarah had anticipated this reaction, but experiencing it was still difficult. "The asset contacted us through an intermediary. He wants out of the training program, and he's willing to provide intelligence in exchange for extraction during our assault on the facility." Captain Torres crossed her arms. "Commander, this sounds like we're asking a kid to betray people who will kill him if they find out, just so we can get intelligence for our mission." "The situation is more complex than that," Sarah replied, struggling to maintain her professional composure while dealing with the moral weight of the situation. "The asset approached us. He wasn't recruited or coerced. He made contact because he witnessed the execution of 3 other boys who tried to refuse their suicide missions." Shook his head in disgust. "Jesus Christ, Sarah, these bastards are executing children who won't blow themselves up." "According to the asset, yes. Boys who show reluctance or attempt to escape are used as examples to intimidate the others. The asset has seen this happen multiple times over the past year." The room erupted in angry voices as the operators processed this information. The idea of children being forced to become suicide bombers and executed if they refused was beyond anything most of them had encountered, even in years of counterterrorism operations. Chief raised his voice above the others. "Commander, what exactly is this kid asking for in return for his intelligence?" Sarah displayed a new slide showing extraction scenarios. "The asset wants to be removed from the facility during our assault and provided with protection and a new identity in the United States." "And if we refuse," asked Master Sergeant, "then the asset will likely be selected for a suicide mission within the next month. Intelligence suggests that his training group is being prepared for immediate deployment to European targets." The moral complexity of the situation was staggering. On one hand, they had an opportunity to gain unprecedented intelligence about a major terrorist facility and potentially save the life of a child who had been victimized by the very people they were fighting. On the other hand, they were essentially using a 15-year-old spy whose life would be forfeit if his activities were discovered. "Address the room. I need to hear from my team leaders. What are your thoughts on this?" Chief was the first to respond. "Sir, this is the best intelligence we've ever had on Al. The facility has been used to train operatives responsible for attacks in Paris, Brussels, and Berlin. If we can shut it down, we'll save a lot of innocent lives. At the cost of using a child as our intelligence source, Captain Torres replied sharply. There has to be another way to get this intelligence. Master Sergeant shook his head. There isn't another way, and we all know it. We've been trying to penetrate this facility for months. This might be our only chance. The debate continued for several minutes, with operators wrestling with the ethical implications of using intelligence provided by a child in mortal danger. Sarah watched the discussion unfold, understanding that the decision ultimately rested with the mission commanders, but knowing that her recommendation would carry significant weight. Finally called for quiet. Commander Mitchell, I need your professional assessment. Is this intelligence reliable enough to base a major operation on? Sarah straightened her shoulders and looked around the room. In my professional opinion, this intelligence is not only reliable, but it represents the best opportunity we've had to disrupt a major terrorist training operation. The asset has provided detailed information about security procedures, training schedules, personnel locations, and planned attacks that has been through multiple independent sources. She paused, then continued with quiet intensity. But I also need to tell you that this asset is not just providing intelligence. He's crying out for help. This boy has been forced to watch other children be murdered for refusing to become suicide bombers. He's been told that he will be sent on a mission to kill innocent civilians in Europe within the next month. And he's risking his life every day to provide us with information because he believes we might be his only chance at survival. The room was silent again, but the quality of the silence had changed. Instead of shock and anger, Sarah sensed something deeper, the recognition that sometimes moral choices in war were not between good and evil, but between different kinds of tragedy. Commander, said Chief quietly, what happens to the kid if we don't act on this intelligence? He'll be deployed on a suicide mission, probably targeting civilians in a major European city. Best case scenario, he completes the mission and dies killing innocent people. Worst case scenario, he refuses at the last moment and is executed by his handlers. Rubbed his forehead, the weight of command evident in his posture. And if we do conduct the operation based on his intelligence? We have detailed plans for extracting him during the assault. He'll be provided with a new identity and protection in the United States. He'll have a chance at a normal life instead of dying as either a terrorist or a victim. Master Sergeant raised his hand. Commander, have you considered that this might be a trap, that the kid might be a double agent working for the terrorists? Sarah nodded. We've considered that possibility extensively. The intelligence he's provided has been cross-referenced with signals intercepts, satellite imagery, and other sources. Every piece of information has checked out. Additionally, the personal risk to him is enormous. If he's discovered, he'll be tortured and executed. The risk-benefit analysis doesn't support the idea that he's a willing double agent. Captain Torres leaned forward. What about the possibility that he's been turned? That they know he's in contact with us and are feeding him false information? Again, we've considered that. But the intelligence he's providing includes information that could only come from someone with direct access to operational planning. He's provided details about security vulnerabilities, training schedules, and personnel movements that would be counterproductive for the terrorists to reveal, even in a deception operation. The discussion continued for another 30 minutes as the operators worked through every aspect of the intelligence and its source. Sarah answered each question with the thoroughness and precision that had earned their trust, but she could sense that something fundamental had changed in the room. Finally stood up. I'm going to ask everyone except Commander Mitchell to step outside for a few minutes. I need to confer with my team leaders. As the room emptied, leaving only Sarah and the senior SEAL leadership, she felt a familiar tension in her chest. She had been in similar situations before, waiting for operators to decide whether to trust her intelligence, but this felt different. The moral complexity of the situation had changed the dynamic in ways she was still trying to understand. Turned to face her directly. Sarah, I need you to be completely honest with me. Are you recommending this operation because the intelligence is good or because you want to save this kid? It was the question Sarah had been asking herself for 2 weeks. Both, she admitted. The intelligence is exceptional, and the opportunity to disrupt a major terrorist training facility is something we can't ignore. But yes, I also believe we have a moral obligation to help this boy if we can. Chief crossed his arms. Commander, that's admirable, but we can't base military operations on rescue missions. Our job is to eliminate threats to American security, not to save every victim of terrorism. I understand that, Chief. But in this case, eliminating the threat and saving the victim are the same operation. The intelligence he's providing makes the mission possible, and the mission gives us the opportunity to extract him. Studied her carefully. Sarah, your judgment has been flawless for 6 months. My team trusts you completely. But this situation is different from anything we've dealt with before. I need to know that your emotional investment in saving this kid isn't compromising your analytical objectivity. Sarah met his gaze steadily. Sir, I've spent 2 weeks questioning my own motivations and analyzing every piece of intelligence from multiple angles. I've had other analysts review the information independently. I've consulted with child psychology experts about the reliability of intelligence from adolescent sources. I've done everything I can think of to ensure that my personal feelings aren't compromising my professional judgment. She paused, then added quietly, but I can't pretend that I don't care about what happens to this boy. If that makes my judgment suspect, then you need to find another intelligence officer for this mission. The room fell silent, as and his senior enlisted leaders exchanged glances. Sarah had just offered to remove herself from the most important mission of her career because she couldn't separate her professional duty from her personal conscience. Finally spoke, Commander, your willingness to admit your emotional investment actually makes me more confident in your judgment, not less. An intelligence officer who could look at this situation without feeling something would be someone I wouldn't trust. Relief washed over Sarah but wasn't finished. However, he continued, I need to know that if circumstances change during the mission, if we have to choose between mission success and saving the kid, you'll support the decisions we make in the field. It was a fair question, but one that cut to the heart of Sarah's moral conflict. Sir, I can't promise that I won't disagree with field decisions, but I can promise that I'll support whatever choices you make and continue to provide the best intelligence support possible. Chief nodded approvingly. That's honest, Commander, and it's all we can ask for. As the other operators filed back into the room, Sarah could see that word of their private discussion had somehow spread. The atmosphere was different, still serious, but with an undercurrent of resolution that hadn't been there before. Addressed the full group. Ladies, and, after discussion with my senior leadership, we're going to recommend approval for Operation Damascus Steel based on Commander Mitchell's intelligence package. The mission will include provisions for extracting the asset during the assault. Captain Torres raised her hand. Sir, what about the ethical concerns about using a child as an intelligence source? Glanced at Sarah before answering. Captain, we've decided that in this case, our ethical obligation is to save this boy if we can while simultaneously disrupting a terrorist training operation that threatens innocent lives around the world. Sometimes doing the right thing means accepting moral complexity rather than looking for simple answers. Master Sergeant stood up. Sir, I want to go on record as supporting this mission. If we can shut down this training facility and save a kid's life at the same time, that's exactly the kind of operation we should be conducting. One by one, the other team leaders voiced their support. Sarah watched as the initial shock and moral outrage transformed into professional determination to conduct a mission that would serve both strategic objectives and humanitarian principles. Outstanding, said. Commander Mitchell, please continue with the operational briefing. For the next 2 hours, Sarah walked the combined Special Operations team through every aspect of the mission. She detailed the facility layout, security procedures, personnel locations, and timing requirements for both the assault and the asset extraction. The questions were sharp and professional, but they lacked the skepticism that had characterized her first briefing with the SEALs. As the briefing concluded, Master Sergeant approached Sarah's position. Commander, I want to apologize for my initial reaction about the asset. You were right to bring this intelligence to us, and I respect the moral courage it took to be completely honest about the source. Thank you, Sergeant. I understand your concerns, and they were valid questions that needed to be asked. Captain Torres joined the conversation. Ma'am, I have teenage children at home. The idea of a 15-year-old in this situation is horrifying to me as a mother and as a Marine. but you're right that we have an opportunity to help him while accomplishing our mission." As the room emptied, remained behind. "Sarah, I have one more question. What happens to the kid after we extract him?" Sarah had been coordinating with multiple agencies on this issue. "He'll be debriefed extensively, but carefully, with child psychologists present. Then he'll be placed in a witness protection-style program with a new identity, educational support, and counseling to help him recover from what he's been through. And you're confident he can be trusted, that he won't pose a security risk?" "As confident as we can be about anyone in this situation. He's been thoroughly vetted, he's demonstrated genuine desire to escape the terrorist organization, and he's shown consistent cooperation with our intelligence requirements. But ultimately, saving his life is worth some level of risk." Extended his hand. "Sarah, this has been the most difficult briefing I've ever sat through, not because of the mission complexity, but because of the moral weight of the decision. But I want you to know that your honesty and moral courage in presenting this intelligence made it possible for us to make the right choice." As they shook hands, Sarah felt a deep sense of validation. 6 months ago, she had struggled to earn the basic respect of skeptical SEALs. Today, she had presented them with intelligence that challenged their moral assumptions and forced them to grapple with the complex realities of modern warfare. And they had trusted her judgment enough to approve one of the most difficult missions any of them had ever contemplated. Operation Damascus Steel was conducted successfully 2 weeks later. The Joint Special Operations Team destroyed the terrorist training facility, captured 12 high-value targets, and recovered a treasure trove of intelligence about planned attacks across Europe. Most importantly, they extracted a 15-year-old boy who had spent 18 months of his young life being trained to murder innocent civilians. The words Sarah had spoken in that briefing room, "let her finish," had come not from the SEALs, but from himself, when other team leaders had tried to interrupt her explanation about the moral complexity of using a child as an intelligence source. Those 3 words had created the space for her to present the complete picture, including the humanitarian dimensions that ultimately influenced the team's decision to approve the mission. The boy, now living under a new identity in suburban Virginia, had no idea that his rescue had been orchestrated by a female intelligence officer who had risked her career to ensure that moral considerations were given equal weight with strategic objectives. He was attending high school, learning English, and slowly recovering from trauma that no child should ever experience. For Sarah, the mission represented something more than professional success. She had discovered that earning respect from elite warriors was not just about providing accurate intelligence or demonstrating tactical competence. It was about having the moral courage to present difficult truths, to advocate for what was right even when it complicated the mission, and to trust that good people would make good decisions when given complete information. The words, "let her finish," had indeed silenced an entire SEAL team, but not through confrontation or argument. They had created silence through recognition that sometimes the most important things an intelligence officer had to say were not about targets and tactics, but about the human cost of the operations they were asked to plan and execute. 6 months after walking into a room full of skeptical SEALs, Sarah Mitchell had become something she never expected. Not just a trusted intelligence officer, but a moral voice in the special operations community. Someone who reminded warriors that their humanity was as important as their tactical skills. The title of the story, about words that silenced an entire SEAL team, captured a moment when professional respect, moral clarity, and operational necessity converged in a way that changed how elite warriors thought about their missions and their responsibilities to the innocent victims caught in the crossfire of the war on terror. Years later, when had become an admiral and Sarah had risen to lead the intelligence division for all special operations, they would still remember that briefing as the moment when they learned that the most powerful weapon in their arsenal was not their tactical expertise or technological superiority, but their commitment to doing what was right even when it was difficult. The boy they had saved had grown up to become a doctor, using his life to heal others in a way that stood in stark contrast to the destruction he had once been trained to inflict. He never knew the full story of his rescue, but somewhere in his new life, he carried the legacy of an intelligence officer who had refused to let moral complexity prevent moral action, and a team of warriors who had trusted her enough to let her finish explaining why saving one life was worth risking their own.